So there's a damaging way of living that people get caught up in. Think of it as extreme thinking. It's all or nothing, perfection or failure. We're success or we're a failure. We're going to do it perfectly or we're going to procrastinate and not do it at all. And that is, for a lot of people, the main cause of anxiety in their life. Because, see, anxiety lives in these edges. It loves when we think that way. When we think rigidly. It's very rigid, and things that are rigid are breakable. So, it's extreme. And it's actually easier to live in these edges for people because they can go by checklists. They don't really have to think, and they can just kind of check things off. I'm going to live in this place because you think about relationships, for example. Conflict is what actually working through it successfully that builds intimacy. And in fact, your friends that are willing to fight with you, they're also willing to fight for you. But the all or nothing perspective is I'm just going to be aggressive, and cuss people out and distance people and be mean, or I'm just going to avoid. I'm going to be passive. But we want to find ways to live in the middle. The language of living on the extremes is like, I can't. I can't do it. I won't. It'll never happen. Never. Or on this side over here, it's like, I must. Or I should. Or, I ought. It's really guilt-inducing words. And I know my spelling's not always great, but if I misspell something, that's okay. But in the middle here, this is where life is best lived. Life is best lived in the middle. This is why I collect 7-Up bottles. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's okay to be a 7. A 7 is fine. And so in the middle here, you have things like options. I got to make a choice. I got to make a decision. And I can make a bad decision. I could make a poor decision, and I could, not feel good about myself, but I could learn and grow. Decision, choice, options. You have opportunities that live here. But most of all, this is in the middle. This is liberty. This is freedom. This is freedom right here because we can trust ourselves. We can follow, the direction that God has for us. We can move and make hard decisions because this may look like it's a lot easier living in these extremes where anxiety lives, but over the long term, it's actually a lot harder because you're not living the life that you were meant to live because it's risky. It's easier. It's like this, you can do easy now and then you have hard later in your future. You can do hard now by making decisions and choices, and you can have easy later because the language in this area here is like, I get to try something. I get to do that. I get to make that decision. I can. I think I can't should be a bad word. It's like, how can I grow? What's the opportunity or how am I growing? I can try. It doesn't have to be perfect, but this language is a language of freedom. And so some examples here, like conflict, for example. I already mentioned that earlier. Conflict, you can think, well, I can't deal with that situation. And so you avoid. Or somebody says something to you that is a little bit of a criticism, and it's real, it's good information, and you just demonize them. You act as if they're out to get you, and you shut them off. So cut off. We cut people off then. And then that relationship doesn't go anywhere. Or we can just get aggressive and say horrible things about them rather than living in the middle where we're going to negotiate and we're going to discuss. And it is harder. It takes more energy. When you're communicating, you may have to start up slower. So, you could take this the wrong way, but this thing has concerned me and I want to address it. It's going to be a much more validating kind of listening, hard communication that happens here in the middle. But eventually, that's how you build the connection that you really need to have a good, healthy relationship. So you don't want to avoid, you want to take the time to do that. Or think of even, a challenge that you may have. You may be thinking like you want to build new friendships, for example. And I'll hear this from people. I want to build new friendships. And they say, but I can't, or I'm too old, or I'm too young, or there's not people with my same interests. Well, that's all the all or nothing rigid thinking. Instead you can change it. And if you can recognize the rigid thinking, then you can change it. Then you recognize, you step back from it and say, wow, I don't have to actually think this way. I can step back. And then you start changing and saying, well, I can try to make new friends. I can join that book club, or I can go to church, or I can go to that luncheon that I always avoid at work for people's birthdays. Or you can reach out to somebody new. Like I did over the weekend. I invited somebody to go to a baseball game I didn't even know very well. It was a risk, but we tried something new. But this is where life is enjoyable, because the other thing that lives in this area is joy, happiness. It's no fun being rigid. I mean, it's no fun being anxious all the time. So how can you be more flexible in your life, professionally, personally, in whatever way? How can you live in the middle? It's going to take some adjustment. It's going to mean you're uncomfortable. You got to live in the discomfort zone. You got to live outside of what's comfortable, but you can do it.